Good afternoon, and welcome to CFP Board's webinar on understanding the apprenticeship pathway. The webinar will begin momentarily. Good afternoon. Welcome to CFP Board's webinar, Understanding the Apprenticeship Pathway. My name is John Loper. I'm the Managing Director for Professional Practice at CFP Board. I oversee the education, exam, and experience functions of the certification process, and we're happy that you were able to join us today. With me are my colleagues Amanda Zapata and Courtney Thompson. They'll be helping me answer some of the questions that you all have related to the apprenticeship pathway in our ongoing series to help candidates understand the various ways that we approve experience submissions. Let's move to the next slide. So of the submissions that we get, the vast majority that come in are for the standard pathway. So today we're only going to be talking about the apprenticeship pathway. So let's talk a little bit about what it is. Instead of the 6,000 hour requirement, the apprenticeship pathway is a 4,000 hour requirement with 3 specific requirements. And one of the reasons there are fewer apprenticeship pathway submissions is because our definition is so stringent. And let's talk about it. The first piece is that your job activities must involve experience in all 7 elements of the personal financial planning process. So if you look at the 7 areas and you're involved with 6, then your pathway would more likely be standard because it would not meet that part of the definition. All experience must be delivered by personally engaging with individual clients. And one of the questions we get a lot, and I know Courtney gets a lot as she reviews experience submissions, we don't require that new planners meet or engaging directly with clients all 40 hours every week. However, we do require that you are involved in the process, whether it's observing your senior advisor in the process. This does not mean that you personally are always delivering financial planning advice over those 40 hours, but you are involved in the process. And then the third piece, and that there's not an exception to this, all experience must be completed under the direct supervision of a CFP professional. The question we get about this one is, does my boss have to be a CFP? Now, of course, that makes it easier if your supervisor is a CFP professional. However, if there's somebody that you work with or works closely with you that will attest to the work that you do, and they're going to have to attest because you're going to have to ask for their CFP board ID number, that may also qualify. But the importance of this third piece is why we're only expecting 4,000 hours of experience versus the standard pathway. So it's significantly less. That's the value we place on the supervision of a CFP professional. How do we review apprenticeship experience? So we're going to go through the sample screens in a second, but we want to know the first step is, how do you engage with clients? What steps, and we've already covered this, which steps of the financial planning process are you involved with or you use? And then finally, who's the CFP professional, the supervisor that is willing to attest to this work? On the first step, how you engage with clients. So as you see below, these are the types of experience that we review. I primarily engage with clients. I primarily support the planner. I primarily supervise financial planners. I completed an internship with the Financial Planning Association, or I teach college level courses. If you do not select number 1, your experience will be counted under the standard pathway. So like we said in the beginning as one of the important parts of the definition, you have to primarily engage with clients for financial planning, personal financial planning purposes. Number 2, what are some job details and steps of the process used? So as you can see here, the primary elements of the personal financial planning process. Understanding the client's personal and financial circumstances is number 1. Identifying and selecting goals is number 2. Analyzing the client's current course of action and potential alternative courses of action is number 3. Developing the financial planning recommendation is number 4. Presenting the financial planning recommendation is number 5. Implementing the financial planning recommendations is 6. And monitoring progress is number 7. You must be involved in all 7 of these. Once again, you don't have to be the one presenting, but you either need to be involved in the creation of the presentation or observing a senior advisor in the presentation, but that's how you're going to gain the experience that we're looking for. All 7 of these must be checked for the apprenticeship pathway. So assuming that you work primarily with clients and you've checked off all 7 of the personal financial planning steps, step 3 is, who is the CFP professional that can attest to this experience? And as you can see here, you'll be able to put the name and the email address. And then at the bottom, you can omit any leading zeros, but put that individual CFP board ID and click validate. And then at the bottom of the page here, you can see that you click save. This supervisor or attester will be contacted once you've completed the 4,000 hours toward the apprenticeship pathway. So the review process. All apprenticeship submissions, as we just covered on the previous slide, need a CFP professional, supervisor, CFP board ID, and that email, the verification will be sent once you cross over the 4,000 hours. Frequently asked questions. We get these over and over again. So let me see if I can try to answer these ahead of time. I'm looking in my account, why are my hours not counted under the apprenticeship? So we've kind of hit on a lot of those so far. Are you working primarily with clients? Have you checked off all 7 boxes? So you may want to go back to the first slide and say, did I check off that I work with clients, or am I primarily in a support role? Because if I'm primarily in a support role, that may be why my hours are not counted. What happens if I enter a job role that doesn't qualify? So you think you have all of it, but at the very end, you realize it doesn't meet the full definition. Well, the good news is those hours would still potentially count. And in many cases, I should say most cases, those hours would then count under the standard pathway. But as I mentioned previously, the standard pathway is 6,000 hours, not the 4,000 associated with apprenticeship pathway. So thank you for your attention. We're going to open it up in just a second for your questions. But if you have any question we don't get to today, or if you have specific questions related to your situation, please reach out to us directly at experience@cfpboard.org. Courtney will be more than willing to try to help you answer your specific questions. Or before you email, if you want to check out our resources at cfp.net, go to cfp.net/experience. So let's open up the webinar for any questions. And you can type those questions in the Q&A box on your screen.
And John, as we get some of the questions in, I do want to just mention that you can input multiple entries that may count towards your apprenticeship experience. So you may have started under one CFP professional, moved jobs, and then started working under another CFP professional. So just enter those as separate entries. And if you see an entered status, we're just waiting for your hours to be completed. If you see an under internal review status, we may reach out with some additional questions when reviewing your experience. And if you see a pending verification status, verification has been sent to your supervisor and we're just waiting to hear back from that individual.
Those are good points, Amanda. Thanks for saying that. So yeah, it's not an ominous sign that we're asking for more information. We're probably just asking for some clarification. And then pending verification, if you're waiting on that, feel free to reach out to the person that you put down as the attester and say, hey, CFP board sent that email. Would you please take a look and make sure that you got that? Because we can always send it again. One of the questions we got too, it says, where do I find the CFP board ID? Your best bet is to ask the person that you're asking to attest. CFP professionals know, they know their CFP board ID very well.
Yeah, we have another question here, John. Should we wait until we complete the 4,000 hours to enter experience in the CFP board account, or enter it with an end date, or keeping the end date open, but enter it gradually, or enter it all at one time?
Yeah, great question. So we encourage candidates to submit experience as soon as possible. Get that piece of the certification process in motion. Have the team here at CFP board review that. And like Amanda said, which is a great reminder, you may have a few different experience submissions at different organizations, both of which may count toward apprenticeship, one of which may count, the other may count towards standard. And obviously we're going to give you credit for the one you get to faster. So if you get to the 4,000 apprenticeship, that's how you'll qualify. If the standard gets you there faster, then we'll count that. That's another question that we get as well.
Another question, John. I'm working full-time now, but prior to working as a full-time employee, I was an intern for the same company and was under the supervision of a CFP professional. Do internship hours count towards the apprenticeship pathway?
So in internship hours can count toward apprenticeship if they meet the definition that we discussed. So compensation or role with the firm, as you can see in the screens that I covered, is not considered. So we don't ask you, are you an intern? Are you an employee? Are you an independent contractor? We're more interested in the specific job tasks. Now, that may require you to put in an internship entry for that particular role, if you think that counts toward apprenticeship. And then when you're hired, if it's a new role, don't hesitate to put in a second entry. Or if it's exactly the same role, but you were an intern and now you're an employee, you just want to make sure that the dates are correct in case there was a gap between internship and employee.
Great. We have a question here about combined experience, and I think this means, combining a standard and apprenticeship experience. I think you explained this a little bit, John, but if you could expand on that.
I'm going to hit that again because we get that question a lot. So yes, you can be earning apprenticeship hours and standard hours at the same time, and we're going to give you credit for whichever one you get to first. If for whatever reason the apprenticeship hours fall short, those can count toward standard. So hopefully I answered that question.
Yeah, typically not the reverse. So typically standard hours won't count towards apprenticeship unless they meet those specific 3-part requirements. But apprenticeship hours will count towards the standard pathway.
Yeah, and then the next question that we see here, I think we covered on the last slide. The process as you near and complete the 4,000 hour requirement for apprenticeship pathway is that triggers the email, the attestation email that goes to the supervisor, and your status would move to pending verification. You would see that in your experience account. So there's nothing wrong with you giving a friendly reminder to that individual to review that on your behalf.
Are there any resources to look for apprenticeship positions?
That's a great question. There are not a lot of financial planning firms that specifically advertise that their experience aligns with our apprenticeship pathway. However, what I would say to you, and that's a great question, is since you now understand the definition, as you're investigating roles, you could say, hey, is this role involved in all 7 steps of the financial planning process? And is this role supervised by a CFP professional. You'll also be encouraged to know that we are being contacted by firms who employ a fair number of CFP professionals, that many are trying to align their training programs with our definition so that new employees can achieve the apprenticeship pathway experience more quickly.
And I would also just add that we do have the CFP Board Career Center. So you can look for positions on the CFP Board Career Center completely free. You'll use your same account credentials, but you can go to the CFP Board Career Center to search for open positions that are available in the financial planning profession. Another question for you, John. Does apprenticeship have to be paid? Can it be within a FPA membership forum or any other type of position, but does apprenticeship have to be paid?
Apprenticeship does not have to be paid. As I mentioned previously, we don't ask how you're paid. We don't ask if you're an intern. We don't ask if you're an employee or an independent contractor. We ask, what are the specific job tasks? Is it under the supervision of a CFP professional, and how many hours per week? So no, it does not have to be paid.
We have another question here about how do I know how the CFP professional supervisor counts the number of hours? Who should I talk to about documenting that?
Well, my first thought is the individual, I would think, should have a good idea the number of hours he or she works in Apprenticeship Pathway, or if the question is what percentage of my role is apprenticeship versus standard, that might be a conversation I have with the individual you're hoping will attest your experience. In other words, you might say to that individual, hey, I'm going to try to get credit for 60% of this job under the Apprenticeship Pathway. Does that make sense to you? Do you agree with that assessment? I would get that agreement up front so that you're on the same page. So it makes it a much more, an easier exercise for the attester when he or she gets that email.
Yeah, that's great advice, really staying connected to your supervisor. I think we answered these questions already, and I think they came in when you were talking about this, John, but just one last time, just to go over, combined experience. If someone has started a job with a company, maybe they completed 4,000 hours, that would count towards the standard pathway. And then they took in a position that would count, all of the requirements would count towards the apprenticeship pathway. How does that get added up in our system?
Yeah, so they stack, and whichever one you hit first is how you should apply that experience. So if you're short on apprenticeship hours, if you're at 3,000 but you need 4, then and you're not in an apprenticeship type role now, then the answer is you're going to need 3,000 more under the standard pathway to get to our requirement.
Another question here is, if I don't currently work with a CFP professional attesting to my experience, what level of oversight is expected for the CFP professional, and how does that CFP professional attester meet his or her oversight obligations?
That's a good question, and we had this conversation with a firm that's trying to establish a training program to meet this definition. The individual needs to be very familiar with you and the work that you're doing, and comfortable with attesting to it. The requirement is not that they're your direct supervisor, but notice the work we use is supervisor. So in other words, they're close enough to it that they have no reservation about attesting to it. That's how the individual will meet his or her oversight obligations. Once again, that's a conversation you should have with that individual before trying to submit for Apprenticeship Pathway.
Is the limit 40 hours per week of work experience that can be entered?
Yes, it is. So we get that question a lot too. I work 60 hours a week. The system will give you credit for 40.
Great. Is there a way to find CFP professionals near me? Maybe they can somebody to contact to see if they can work for that CFP professional? Are there any types of resources that we have like that?
Yep, you could Google CFP professional and your hometown. You can also go to our website, letsmakeaplan.org. That allows you to search for CFP professionals in your zip code.
Another question here. I'm a career changer from accounting to financial planning. I have a lot of experience with creating and reviewing financial reports with owners and clients, and I have done some auditing work for clients. Would I be able to get any credit for my time as an accountant? It looks like this is for either pathway.
So yeah, based on how I'm reading that, if that previous experience was not supervised by a CFP professional, and it doesn't sound like it was meeting all 7 steps, yes, there is a way, if it meets the definition for standard pathway, for independent contractors to get credit. If there's somebody who can attest to it, or you can attest to it, we do review those types of experience from previous roles. Once again, specific questions, well, you could either input it in the tool or send your specific questions to experience@cfpboard.org.
Another question here. So do apprenticeship hours count if one is involved in all of the client-facing meetings or interactions regarding financial planning, along with the work in building the plan, even if the supervising CFP professional is the one leading the client engagements?
The answer to that question is yes. And you actually did a better job of explaining that, I think, than I did during the presentation. The answer is yes.
Great, thank you. It's a good question.
We get it all the time. So thank you for asking that again.
We have another question that is commonly asked about personal delivery. And I think this is very simple to, similar to the question we just asked, but just confirming, right? Personal delivery is exactly like what we just mentioned. You're involved in all steps of the process there.
Yep, involved in all steps of the process. Personal, that's another question that we get. We do not consider corporate financial planning. The end user is a personal financial planning client, all 7 steps with the supervision of a CFP professional.
We have a couple questions that are unrelated to the webinar. If we have time, I'll make sure we touch on those. We did get another question about, is there an upcoming webinar on the standard pathway details? And I don't think we have anything specific on standard pathway. We do have a few webinars out there on indirect support and just general experience, frequently asked questions. So we do have some other webinars that fit under the standard pathway that you can find on the CFP Board YouTube channel, and we can definitely take this recommendation or consideration into our planning. While we wait to see if there are any other apprenticeship questions come in, John, we have 2 questions that are just related to the certification process outside of experience that I think are frequent enough that are good to answer. Can you discuss the pre-CE requirement if you haven't completed your hours within a year of passing the exam, and can you do those ahead of time?
So the answer is you can't do them ahead of time, and they start to accumulate a year after you've taken the exam. And at any point, you can log into your account after a year from completing the exam and get a sense for your CE requirement.
Yeah, and like John mentioned, you can't complete those prior to sitting for the exam, but after you pass the exam, if you know that your experience or degree is going to take longer than a year, you can actually start accruing continuing education, or I'm sorry, not accruing, that's the wrong word. You can actually start completing continuing education, but you have to have passed the exam already. So anything since passing the exam can be considered towards your future requirement if you know that you will be over a year to complete your experience or degree requirements. Like John mentioned, though, is you won't see that officially become a requirement in your account until that 13th month hits. So you can definitely keep a log, personal log, make sure that it's getting credited to your account. Just use your CFP board ID number.
We have a question: how early can you take the exam prior to meeting the 4,000 hours? And there's no experience requirement to take the exam. The only requirement to take our exam is meeting our education requirement. So if you've met the education requirement, the education coursework requirement for CFP certification, you're eligible to take our exam. Now, assuming you pass the exam, you can't become certified until you meet the experience requirement, whether it's the 4,000 or the 6,000 standard pathway.
Yep. And then one other question here about, what is the process once all requirements are completed: education, exam, experience, degree, and ethics, how that wraps up. So once all your certification requirements are completed, again, that's your education coursework, the exam is completed, experience hours are totally verified, your degree is on file, your ethics background check is all verified. At that point, then you'll just be asked to make your certification payment, which will be available in your online account. And as soon as you pay, you will immediately receive notification that you are certified and can start using the CFP marks. So your payment is going to be the very, very, very last step in your certification process. And as soon as you do that, you're good to go.
All right. Any other questions, Amanda?
No, it doesn't look like we have any other questions. As John has mentioned, if anything else comes up, please send an email to experience@cfpboard.org. We are more than happy to help you on your path to certification.
Thank you all so much for spending your Wednesday afternoon with us at CFP Board. Hopefully, we took some of the mystery out of the apprenticeship pathway. We're here to help you. We're here to answer your questions. Experience@cfpboard.org, or visit us on the web at cfp.net/experience. Everybody have a great afternoon and a great week.